We have the former Congressman Mark Kennedy joining us, director of the Wabaugh Institute for Strategic Competition, Wilson Center. Also, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Lushenko joins us. He's the chief strategist for the military's Joint Counter Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems Office. Lectures at George Washington University. So you're essentially, General, an expert on this, right? So can I start with you on that topic? I wasn't even going to start specifically with like Golden Dome, but let's do that because Brian brought it up. Would that help with something like this if people are concerned about drones?
Well, I think it would, right? So what we're really talking about is integrated air missile defense, of which counter-drone operations are a piece of. And so what we talk about at the JCO, and Connell, I do admit that's a mouthful of a title, is really increasing the standoff we have against these capability vis-a-vis U.S. military bases and critical infrastructure. The term we like to use is layered defense. So trying to extend your operational reach as far out as you possibly can against these capabilities that are coming towards you through the use of both lethal and non-lethal capabilities.
All right, interesting. Mark, jump in on this, what Colonel Lushenko's talking about, but also where your area of expertise is, which is China. So when you hear about this, and we talked about, I want to talk about the technology involved with Ukraine. It really was amazing, right? Some of the attacks that they were able to pull off. Not only the drone attacks, by the way. You see, I think we have video. You see, they blew up that bridge in Crimea, which was an amazing underwater attack. So they're showing what can be done in modern warfare. What about the risk? This is the bridge. This was crazy. What about what can be done here to us and whether all that land China owns is a real risk? What do you think?
Well, we have a risk right up against the bases, as was shown with Ukraine. A Golden Dome is really meant to protect our borders. These drones that attacked the Russian bases went in a concealed car to get closer to the bases. So I think a more acceleration of anti-drone in a multi-layered approach with directed energy, with electronic warfare, with kinetic, all combined, swarms of drones that protect our high-value military assets is something we need to accelerate on. The Department of Defense has been doing some of that with the replicator, but we need to really accelerate this at scale if we're going to really match the threat. Golden Dome plus base defense.
Right. All right. So are we behind there, Colonel Lushenko? I've seen some stories suggesting to the former congressman's point that we are, right, that we have a lot of work to do. And if so, what are the priorities here? Where do we need to dig in? And we all watched those drones flying over. I guess they were drones in New Jersey, and some people were joking around about them. But I think they did point out something. Hey, listen, what if this was real? What if this was China? What if this was an adversary? What work do we need to do?
Well, I think it is true, and our senior leaders, to include the U.S. Northern Command Commander General Guijo and others before him, as well as the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, General Mingus, who provides sort of executive governance for the military on these matters, have stated as such. So I think we really have to invest not just in the kit, which is to say the counter-drone capability, the training and the personnel, but also in understanding the policies and authorities within the United States that would enable U.S. military personnel to employ these systems in the first place, and importantly, in concert with the interagency, so the Department of Justice, the Department of Transportation, in doing so in such a way that mitigates the risk to Americans.
Now, what's the risk? What is that risk to Americans from your point of view, Mark, when it comes to China? I would think that it has a lot to do with surveillance and maybe not so much on, like, we're worried they're going to have a drone in here and attack us, but maybe not. Maybe there is a real risk of that as well. What do you say?
Well, I think there is a question of surveillance. Remember that China really has a very strong market share in the small drones. Many of the small drones that we're using in America come from China.
Yeah, DJI and others. Yep.
Our military has a hard time getting U.S.-sourced drones. So to the extent it becomes a drone-on-drone capability, whether it be surveillance or delivering ammunition, we have to catch up quickly in our ability to produce these drones.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.